In the last session, we discussed in detail how the transmission of nerve impulse takes place across the axon. Now, in this session, we will see that action potential from one neuron, how it gets transmitted to another neuron. That is the transmission of impulses. So, it's a transmission of impulses, right? Okay, so we have seen that action potential will will pass through the axon, and then finally it reaches the axon terminals, and we know these axon terminals end with the synaptic knobs. So this is axon, and we have axon terminals, and these are the synaptic knob. Right, now these synaptic knobs will contain inside synaptic vesicles. So here you can see inside there are synaptic vesicles, and we'll also see mitochondria present along with them. So these are synaptic vesicles. The synaptic vesicles consists of or contain neurotransmitters. They contain neurotransmitters. Okay, right. Now the impulse that passes through the axon, that is action potential. Okay, so this action potential transmission, and finally it comes to the synaptic knob, and this transmission will make these synaptic vesicles to merge with the membrane of synaptic knob, and then release the neurotransmitter into the synaptic cleft. So you can see the neurotransmitter released out. So how this process takes place? Of course, this neurotransmitter uh, which is released will bind with the receptors. So that binds with the receptors which are present on dendrites of postsynaptic neurons. So say suppose these are dendrites, and okay, this is the cell body, and these are dendrites. So this released neurotransmitter comes and binds with the receptors that will be present on the dendrites and the cell body. So what these receptors, they are called uh, ligand gated. So they are called ligand gated channels. Ligand gated channels. So these ligand gated channels are present on dendrites and cell body. They are present on dendrites and cell body of postsynaptic neuron. Okay, so these are called ligand gated channels. So here when the neurotransmitter comes and attaches to these ligand gated channels, they open. That makes the sodium ions to enter in and they depolarize the postsynaptic neuron. Right, so here I just gave you a brief idea. So how the transmission right will pass from one neuron to another neuron. Now I'll see this in detail how it all takes place. So right, we'll take here a synaptic knob. Okay, so this is a synaptic knob, right? And here we have is the dendrite of postsynaptic neuron, right? So this I'll mention here as presynaptic neuron, and this is the postsynaptic neuron. I'll also tell you why I have called them presynaptic neuron or postsynaptic neuron. And here this is the synaptic knob, and I told that this synaptic knob, it consists of right synaptic vesicles. So here these are synaptic vesicles, and these synaptic vesicles will contain neurotransmitter. Like for example, the most common neurotransmitter is acetylcholine, is the neurotransmitter is present inside these synaptic vesicles. So I'll just mention, so this is the synaptic vesicle, and this inside is the neurotransmitter like the acetylcholine, so which is a neurotransmitter. Okay, right. And now I said that on the postsynaptic neuron, the dendrites and the cell bodies will have the ligand gated channels. So here uh, I'll mention, so this is the ligand gated channels. So these are ligand gated channels. Ligand gated right channels. And on the presynaptic neuron, we have here are okay voltage gated sodium channels. So here these are voltage gated sodium channels. So what these are, so these are all voltage gated sodium channel, I'm sorry, voltage gated calcium channel. So here on this I mean in the on the postsynaptic neuron we have ligand gated channels, whereas on the presynaptic neuron we have voltage gated calcium channels. So we have seen on the axon we have voltage gated potassium and sodium channels. Here especially you will have voltage gated right calcium channels. So these are voltage gated calcium channels. Okay, so now the action potential, so when it comes okay so into the synaptic knob, so this is the action potential. So when it comes to the synaptic knob, what it results is it will make open these voltage gated calcium channels. So here outside we have calcium ions, so there will be calcium ions more number okay outside, and there will be okay less calcium ions inside. Now the action potential makes the calcium, voltage gated calcium channels to open. Okay, so I'll just mention this. The action potential makes the calcium channels, voltage gated calcium channels, voltage gated calcium channels to open. So when these voltage gated calcium channels open, it will result in the movement of these calcium ions into the synaptic knob. So you can see here the calcium rushes into the synaptic knob, because we know the calcium ions are more concentrated, okay, in the ECF than inside the neuron. So inside the neuron we have is right, less calcium ions. So here when we'll see, there are mitochondria. We'll find, okay, so right, so this is a mitochondrium. Okay, so here I said the action potential makes the voltage gated calcium channels to open, and this results in movement of the calcium ions from the ECF into the synaptic knob. Now these calcium ions will bind with these synaptic vesicles and make these synaptic vesicles to come and fuse with the synaptic knob membrane. So to come and fuse with the synaptic knob membrane, and the fusion will result in a breakdown of that plasma membrane at that point, and that releases the neurotransmitter present in the synaptic vesicle into the gap present between presynaptic neuron and post synaptic neuron, right? Now here actually there is a gap between the presynaptic neuron and postsynaptic neuron. So this gap is what I call it a synaptic cleft. So it's called synaptic cleft. So this synaptic cleft is a small gap that may be around 200 to 300 angstroms. So that will be the length here, what you see between the presynaptic neuron and postsynaptic neuron. So that is the gap, only 200 to 300 angstroms. Okay, now this presynaptic neuron, okay, presynaptic membrane. So the or I'll consider the neuron itself, the presynaptic neuron plus the synaptic cleft plus the post synaptic neuron. Okay, so you can consider even the membrane, no problem. So this is the membrane of the presynaptic neuron, and this is the membrane of postsynaptic neuron. So now all these three together, that constitutes synapse. Okay, so that constitutes synapse. So you can consider in this the membrane of a presynaptic neuron, the membrane of a postsynaptic neuron. okay, and the synaptic cleft. All these three together, that forms something called synapse. Okay, so you can I'll just mention here presynaptic neuron, or so I'm telling that here you can even include the membrane. So this is the membrane of a presynaptic, and this is the membrane of postsynaptic neuron. Along with the synaptic cleft is the synapse. Okay, so now here, as I told, that the action potential makes these calcium voltage gated calcium channels to open, and the calcium ions enter into it and then bind with these synaptic vesicles and make them to, okay, fuse with the synaptic knob membrane, and the point of fusion will result in break open the membrane and then release the neurotransmitter into this gap. So you can see, right, so many of such synaptic vesicles will fuse and release the neurotransmitter into the gap, and this neurotransmitter comes and binds to these ligand gated channels, and this will open the ligand gated channels, and where, okay, this will result in movement of, so that will result in the movement of sodium ions. So here says these sodium ions, they move into the postsynaptic neuron, and that results in depolarization in the postsynaptic neuron. So already we have seen the movement of sodium ions into the cytoplasm will result in depolarization. So here the sodium ions movement, the sodium ions movement into the postsynaptic neuron, results in depolarization. So now the depolarization, we know action potential is that point where the membranes are depolarized. So that one from the presynaptic neuron, now it is passed to the postsynaptic neuron. And in this way, from neuron to neuron, the nerve impulse will get transmitted. Now these synapses, where the neurotransmitter acts as a mediator, such synapses are called chemical synapses. So we have just now studied about chemical synapses, right? So there is one more type of synapse that is called electrical synapse. So I can say that the synapses are classified into two types, so one chemical synapse, chemical synapses, and another one called electrical synapses, Now these chemical synapses are more in number, so they are more in number in the human body, and electrical synapses are less in the human body. So these are less in number. Okay, so here the chemical synapses is mediated by the neurotransmitter, that is acetylcholine. Okay, so now I hope it is clear how the transmission of nerve impulse from one neuron passes on to another neuron. Now we will see some examples of these neurotransmitters. Of course, most common I said is the acetylcholine, but there are many other types of neurotransmitters. We'll see about those neurotransmitters which help in transmission of nerve impulse from one neuron to another neuron in chemical synapses. Then later we'll see about electrical synapses. And before I go to the next, here I'll show you that of course the fusion, okay, of the membrane. So you can see here the synaptic vesicle completely fused with the uh, plasma membrane of the synaptic knob, and uh, it break open to release the neurotransmitter into the synaptic cleft. So that neurotransmitter binds here and makes these ligand gated channels to open up, and the sodium ions move inside, and that depolarizes the postsynaptic neuron. Okay, fine. Now let's see some neurotransmitters. So we'll see here classes of neurotransmitters, in chemical synapses. So we have around four classes. So we have four classes. So those four classes include the first one, okay, class 1 acetylcholine. So class 1 acetylcholine. Then the class 2, it includes right amines. It includes amines. So these amines may include like noradrenaline or norepinephrine, okay, and also adrenaline or epinephrine. The next under these amines we also have dopamine, then serotonin, then histamine. Okay, so are some examples of these amines. So these neurotransmitters can be stimulatory or inhibitory. So neurotransmitters can be stimulatory or inhibitory. Okay, so the next one, class 3. So under the class 3 we have amino acids. So these act as neurotransmitters, and they include like gamma amino butyric acid. So gamma amino butyric acid, so it's called GABA. Then the next one, glycine. This also comes under the class 3 amino acids. Then next one, the glutamine. The next one, aspartate, etc. are the different neurotransmitters that come under class 3 amino acids. And lastly, class 4, so that includes nitric oxide. So these are some examples, okay, of neurotransmitters. So here in this, the gamma amino butyric acid, this will be always inhibitory, then the glycine is also always inhibitory, whereas the glutamate, I'm sorry, I mentioned glutamine. So glutamate. So this glutamate, so this glutamate is okay, always it will be stimulatory. Is stimulatory. Okay, so here uh, these are the gamma amino butyric acid, that is inhibitory, then glycine is inhibitory, whereas the glutamate will be stimulatory. So that's about different neurotransmitters in chemical synapses. So here the common neurotransmitter, that is acetylcholine. So this is stimulatory. Okay, you can use one more word like okay, excitatory. So stimulatory or excitatory, both are same. So acetylcholine is a stimulatory neurotransmitter. Now let us see about electrical synapse. Right. So coming to these electrical synapses, so these electrical synapses are very rare in our body. Okay, so in the case of this electrical synapse, we see so this is the presynaptic neuron. So this is the synaptic knob. Okay, and this I'll take it as a presynaptic neuron. Is the presynaptic neuron, and so here we have is the postsynaptic neuron. So you can see here the postsynaptic neuron is in very close contact with the presynaptic neuron membrane. So this is how you will see, right? And the synaptic cleft is absent in this case. So in the case of chemical synapse, in case of chemical synapse, okay, I told that this will be, so in the chemical synapse, the synaptic cleft is fluid filled. So it is fluid filled. So in this case you don't find any fluid. The presynaptic neuron membrane and postsynaptic neuron membrane. So this is the postsynaptic neuron. Okay, so the membranes of these two will show gap junctions. So you can see here, okay, so these are the gap junctions called the gap junctions. So the impulse passes through these gap junctions into the postsynaptic neuron. So these electrical synapses are very fast in transmission of impulse. They're very fast in transmission of impulse when compared with the chemical synapse. So chemical synapses are slower because the synaptic vesicle, it has to fuse, and then okay, it has to release the neurotransmitter. So in the case of electrical synapse, so no neurotransmitter. so there is no neurotransmitter. And the membrane of the presynaptic and the postsynaptic neuron are okay connected with with each other, and they show gap junctions. And in the electrical synapse, okay, so that gap or the synapse that will be around only right 20 to 40 angstroms. So here the synaptic cleft is only around 20 to 40 angstroms, whereas in the case of chemical synapse I told it is around 200 to 300 angstroms. So that much gap will be present between presynaptic and postsynaptic neuron, whereas in the case of the electrical synapse, the cleft is very small, right? And the action potential which comes here will straight away moves through these gap junctions into the postsynaptic neuron and depolarizing the postsynaptic neuron. Okay, so the action potential. So here the transmission of nerve impulse across the across the electrical synapse is similar to transmission of nerve impulse. So this is similar to transmission of nerve impulse along the axon. So in a similar way, how the transmission of nerve impulse that took place, that we have studied already, along the axon, the same way the transmission will take place from the presynaptic neuron to postsynaptic neuron through these gap junctions. So here also you have mitochondria. So there are no synaptic vesicles filled with the neurotransmitter. So that is what no neurotransmitters are present, and even no, of course, the synaptic vesicles. So as there are no synaptic vesicles, you don't find even the neurotransmitters, and the transmission will be passing through these gap junctions. So here there will be ion channels. So these are all the ion channels through which the ions move across, that is sodium. So these are ion channels, and the sodium will pass from this point to into this the postsynaptic neuron, okay, and that results in depolarization in postsynaptic neuron, and the transmission of nerve impulse takes place from one neuron to another neuron. Now these electrical synapses, we'll see an example in this case where they are present. So these are present in certain hormone secreting neurons. In hormone secreting neurons within the mammalian hypothalamus. In the mammals, the hypothalamus may have certain hormone secreting neurons, and the connections between them will be through these electrical synapses, okay, are connected by electrical synapses, are connected by electrical synapses, right? So this is how the transmission of nerve impulse takes place across the electrical synapse. So in the next session we shall see about a central neural system of human.